Alright, welcome everyone back to the Ex Umbris podcast here. Myself, Scholar McClarney, and none other than
Schoolman Fawcett, lowly employee of Headmaster McClarney here at the Chesterton Academy of St. Isidore, right here outside of Edmonton, Alberta, the world's only online Chesterton Academy.
That's right, yeah. And if you've been following along, last time we spoke about realism, right? So we're looking at political realism and the implications of that philosophical worldview. Spoke a little bit about Machiavelli, the godfather, if you like, of realism. And what does he do? Well, he turns virtue into virtu. That cold, calculating, callous, ambitious, audacious approach to life. So he's redefining it. And basically, what's fascinating there is this transformation. It's like turning a virtue, right? So it's like turning an elf into an orc, or an ant into an ogre, right? So virtue is turned into virtue. And this is, I think, one of the aspects of realism that's quite fascinating. Now, our students, I don't know about yourself, Schoolman Fawcett, but do you suspect one day they will be princes or princesses? Will they have their own fiefdoms, their own little kingdoms to worry about?
Oh, I worry that they might. Our students, they're very bright. They're very ambitious. They have great leadership potential, so I could see them as princes over the fiefdoms of different corporations, or one shudders to think, even political kingdoms. I could see it happening.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm probably not as sanguine as yourself, but in any case, I thought, you know what?
I don't think it's sanguine. It's very pessimistic.
Very pessimistic.
I wouldn't wish that kind of stress on anybody of being a leader or a prince.
Okay. No.
Uneasy lies the head that wears the crown, as some writer once said.
Oh, right. Yes, indeed. Okay, well, now, here what I have in mind is, how might this be applicable, barring that eventuality, in terms of realism, and really that transformation of virtue into virtue, or that corruption. So I want to think more of at a personal level, or forensic level, if you will, and how this might apply to any of us. All right, so normally, if we see evil or sin a mile away, we can identify it. Well, why? Because it's in contravention with the Ten Commandments, or moral tenets, right? And so that's not so problematic, I think, in identifying it. But again, going back to Machiavelli, what happens if it's wrapped up in the mantle of virtue? Right. And so, how might that play out in one's life? And what I want to think about here is how might this be applicable? We're calling this realism, inception, and virtue. So we'll look at some defense mechanisms against having this creep into our lives, a corrupting force of sin masquerading as virtue. Because, it's one thing to have to decide between good and evil. It's pretty, it's black and white. Right? But what if it's wrapped in this gauze, or this skin of what's right, or the light? Okay, so what I have in mind here is, today, let's go to Shakespeare, and we'll look at a literary example, and I'm hoping next time we can go back to philosophy and look at Ayn Rand in particular, who's going to redefine virtue, or talk about selfishness as a virtue. So maybe we'll say that for another time. But here, what I would like to do is go back to Elizabethan England, or even better yet, through the lens of Elizabethan England to ancient Rome. And we're going to look at Julius Caesar. So if you want to join us, if you have text with you, I have one on the screen. I can do that as well.
So we will read aloud anything that we need to for our podcast listeners. If you're not watching this video, fear not. We will read aloud anything that you really need to hear about.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yep. It's on the screen here. Oh,
and if I remember correctly, it's Act 1, Scene 2.
Yeah, so we're going to look at Act 1, Scene 2, just to set the stage.
So if you're listening at home and you don't have that on screen, but you happen to have a copy of your complete Shakespeare, like I do, it's Julius Caesar, Act 1, Scene 2.
Yep. And just to set the context, what's going on in Act 1 is Caesar's about to return in triumph. Well, it's his triumph, right? He's returning to Rome, and there's the tribunes, Flavius and Marcellus, who are trying to force the people off the streets. They talk about, what do we have the text there? Plucking the feather from Caesar's wings, that his flight might become more ordinary. So they're fearful that Caesar might return and become a tyrant, or something along those lines, sympathizing with Pompey. And
because Pompey is who Caesar has just come from being at war with, or Pompey's sons, right?
Defeated, yeah. So Caesar now is triumphant. He's ready to take control, and so what's interesting about the scene, just as a background, is they're able to use words to convince the people, because we want to look at the power of words here, in particular when it comes to how virtue is presented, at least. And so the people leave the streets, the commoners exit, and yes, there they are. Okay, so what's interesting now, we're going to scene 2. And before we get to Brutus and Cassius, 3 times Caesar is warned with words about the Ides of March. And, well, okay, so this is an example, interesting contrast to scene 1, where, well, he doesn't heed the words.
Now, who is speaking to him? For those who have not read the play or have never seen any of the adaptations, those of you who have not seen the disappointing 1970 movie adaptation with Charlton Heston, who is speaking to Caesar?
Soothsayer. So there's a soothsayer. And then the words are repeated again by, in his entourage, who is it, Anthony, I think, who repeats the words of the soothsayer. So there they have.
So he's returning.
Brutus, rather.
That's right. Yes.
Repeats the words, but it's 3 times repeated to Caesar about being aware of the Ides of March.
So Caesar's coming back. He's being lauded by the crowds, practically worshipped by the crowds, because he's returning victorious from battle. And yet there's this prophet who cries out, right? Yeah. Beware the Ides of March. And this is set the day before the Ides of March. So he's saying basically, like, beware of tomorrow, is what he's saying. And Caesar does ask to see him, but then he's like, this guy doesn't add anything, and so Caesar just dismisses him. He is a dreamer.
Right.
Well, let's leave him behind.
Yeah, exactly. So this is what's fascinating then is this example of words not being trusted. So words could be listened to, like the cobbler and so on. Others, the mechanical people, the plebs, they listen to the tribunes and leave eventually. Here, Caesar's not hearing or hearing out the soothsayer. All right, so do we have to listen to what other people say? Not necessarily. What happens? Well, here we want to look at Cassius and Brutus when they. Cassius approaches him. So, and how the power of words, and how Cassius is going to get into Brutus's mind. So let's go down to line 36 or so, and this is the beginning. He says, "Brutus, I do observe you now of late." How about I'll be Cassius, you be Brutus.
Sure.
Okay. I have not from your eyes that gentleness and show of love as I was wont to have. You bear too stubborn and too strange a hand over your friend that loves you. Now, before going too far, notice 3 ways that Cassius is trying to get into his mind. So first he says, I do observe you. Right. So in other words, I pay attention to you. I heed you. Right? So that's the first thing he's going to do. Second is, as I want to have. So in other words, show your love as I want to have. He wants his goodwill. So not only do I pay attention to you, but hey, Brutus, I really want to have your goodwill. And then third of all, he says, you bear too stubborn and too strange a hand over your friend that loves you. So in other words, I see your problem. I see you have a problem. And it's implied, of course, this is none other than Caesar. Okay, Brutus, let's hear your reply.
Cassius, be not deceived. If I have veiled my look, I turn the trouble of my countenance merely upon myself. Vexed I am of late with passions of some difference, conceptions only proper to myself, which give some soil perhaps to my behaviors. But let not therefore my good friends be grieved, among which number, Cassius, be you one. Nor construe any further my neglect, than that poor Brutus, with himself at war, forgets the shows of love to other men.
All right. So when we watch or listen to Brutus' reply, basically what he's saying is, well, first of all, I guess as far as students and anyone else who's really listening, how do you know if you're being manipulated? Right? So how do you know? Here, Brutus is keeping his cards very close tight to his heart, or tight to his chest. And basically he's saying, yeah, the issue, it's with me alone, right? So don't worry about it, don't construe it. I'm just at war with Brutus himself. And, and he's being vague. He's speaking in somewhat veiled references. But Cassius, of course, is that's just the opening gambit. Let's see what happens next. Okay, he says, then, Brutus, I have much mistook your passion, by means whereof this breast of mine hath buried thoughts of great value, worthy cogitations. Tell me, good Brutus, can I see your face? Or, sorry, can you see your face?
No, Cassius, for the eye sees not itself, but by reflection, by some other things.
'Tis just, and is very much lamented, Brutus, that you have so much mirrors as will turn your hidden worthiness into your eye, that you might see your shadow. All right, well, just pause there for a second. So he's talking about his eye and being able to see himself. And this is the beginning of, I'll call it Inception. So how does Inception work? Well, there's 3 steps to it. But so first again, Cassius, he's basically asking Brutus here, can you see your face? Like, do you know what you'll look like, Brutus? I can see what you're looking like. When other people are around, do you know what you even look like? Okay. So this is the first step, is getting an inception, is getting an idea implanted into someone's mind. All right, so that's not good enough. The second step is then going to have the patient, if you like, or the client, appropriate it as if it's their own. Okay, so as it not a foreign one, but their own. Right, and so the third step is then to tell the patient to see how this is validated by others. So the patient needs this idea is their own. It's implanted, it becomes their own, and then they want others to see how others validate that. Right. So in other words, it's not my own invention, but it's ratified by others around us. Okay. And later in the text, he'll have forged letters. Cassius will forge letters thrown through Brutus's window, and he takes these up as confirmation of what others have said. Okay, let's go back then to our text. Oh, I've heard where many of the best respect in Rome, except immortal Caesar, speaking of Brutus and groaning underneath this age's yoke, have wished that noble Brutus had his eyes.
Into what dangers would you lead me, Cassius, that you would have me seek into myself for that which is not in me?
Therefore, good Brutus, be prepared to hear. Now, notice Brutus is no neophyte to politics, right? And so he has, just like in Inception, he has some defense mechanisms, right, that have been built up. So he's still got some thick skin or some savvy. Certainly he does. It basically says, for that which is not in me. That was the last line that you said there. So in other words, he's identifying, what is this idea you have? It's foreign, right? So he has some antibodies he's going to release and attack this idea that Cassius is implanting in him. In other words, have me seek into myself. So self-pride, something like this. So the question will be, these defense mechanisms have emerged. He can detect, oh yes, he's playing to my pride. Will this be adequate, though? Will this be adequate? And since, and this is continuing on with Cassius here then, and since you know you cannot see yourself, so well as by reflection, your glass will modestly discover to yourself that of yourself which you know, which yet know not of. So here, this is Cassius's counter. Do you see what he's doing there? So he's trying to frame the dilemma. I will be your glass. In other words, your mirror, right? I will let you see. Right, and it's not just I will let you see, but it's obviously implied here. I will let you see what I want you to see. Okay, with me now. Okay, yes, and be not jealous on me, gentle Brutus. Were I common a laughter, or did use to stale with ordinary oaths my love to every new protester, if you know that I do fawn on men and hug them hard after scandal them, or if you know that I profess myself in banqueting to rout then. To all the rout, then hold me dangerous. There's a flourish and a shout in the background.
What means this shouting? I do fear the people choose Caesar for their king.
Aye, do you fear it? Then must I think you not have it so.
I would not, Cassius. Yet I love him well. But wherefore do you hold me here so long? What is it that you would impart to me? If it be aught toward the general good, set honor in one eye and death in the other, and I will look on both indifferently.
Okay, we gotta pause there for that one. That's such a great line. Set honor in one eye and death in the other. So Brutus is not entirely foolish, by no stretch of the imagination. So he suspects rightly here that Cassius is trying to manipulate him somehow. And he declares this is his trump card. This is his ace in the hole, right? I got honor in one eye, in death in the other. What do you think that means, basically?
Ooh, it's an interesting. Well, yeah. Well, he's conflicted right now. So, I mean, in case it's not clear yet to the listener or the reader,
sure.
Cassius is trying to persuade Brutus that Caesar needs to be assassinated.
Yes.
In case, spoiler warning, Caesar dies before the end of this play. Okay. But Brutus is loyal to Caesar, and he doesn't want to kill him. Cassius is trying to persuade him that, yeah, you really do. You already want to kill him. I'm just helping you realize that. So when he says, set honor in one eye and death in the other, and I will look on both indifferently. Goodness, it's like, well, these are these two conflicting things that are going on in him, perhaps, right? The pull towards assassination, maybe, and the sense of honor as well. Maybe what if he says a Roman to have,
or even he's willing to die. He himself would rather die than neglect honor, right? What's honorable for the patria, what's honorable for the republic, or
which foreshadows the ending for him too. Actually, now that I think of it,
yes. Oh, absolutely. So again, the question comes back to what were we saying with set honor in one eye, death in the other. Oh, okay, let's finish that.
Well, let's finish that. Okay, he continues. Sure. For let the gods so speed me as I love, the name of honor more than I fear death.
So, in one way, what he's saying to Cassius here is, I don't need your lens, right? I don't need to see through your glass here. I already have these cardinal virtues. So again, the question is, how do you corrupt someone who's virtuous? Right. So this is again like thinking of Wormwood here, or the Screw Tape Letters, something like this. And so because they have this allegiance already to virtue, and so what needs to happen? Redefine virtue, reinterpret it, right? Corrupt it. And so this is one of the reasons why I say like a bureaucrat in the USSR could live with himself. I'm here. I'm helping to create the Holodomor. This is a famine in Ukraine, and the way they can justify this is say, "Well, they're subhuman, right? Rebels who support the revolution, kulaks who secretly love capitalism, and so I can look myself in the mirror and I can see a just man. Why? Well, because I'm virtuous. I'm doing what's virtuous." Right, okay. So, all right, back to our text here. Yes, there we have it. I know that virtue to be in you, Brutus, and this is Cassius, of course, as well as I do know your outward favor. Well, honor is the subject of my story. Now, let's see what he marked that. Honor is the subject of my story. What's a story? A narrative. Narratives are how we live our lives. We can't operate in this world without framing ourselves in a context, in an overarching narrative. We're in the, as Tolkien would call it, the primary creation, right? We're in the great narrative of God, the artist, who's entered into his own artwork. This is the story that we're in. But no one can live without a narrative. Right? And so he's saying, well, honor is the subject of my story. So he's going to offer a story now for Brutus to see himself in light of. I cannot tell you what you and other men think of this life. But for my single self, I have as lief not to be as lived, not be as live to be in all such things as myself. I was born free as Caesar. So were you. We both had fed as well, we can both endure the winter's cold as well as he. For once upon a raw and gusty day, the troubled Tiber chafing with her shores, Caesar said to me, "Darst thou, Cassius, now leap in with me into this angry flood and swim to yonder point?" Upon the word, accoutred as I was, plunged in, and bade him follow. So indeed he did. The torrent roared, and we buffeted with hasty sinews, and stemming with hearts of controversy. But ere we could arrive at the point proposed, Caesar cried, "Help me, Cassius, or I sink." I, as Aeneas, our great ancestor, did from the flames of Troy upon his shoulder the old Anchises bear, so from the wave of Tiber did I the tired Caesar. And this man is now become a god, as Cassius is a wretched creature and must bend his body of Caesar carelessly, but not on him. I had a fever in Spain, and when the fit was on him, I did mark how he did shake. 'Tis true this god did shake. His coward lips did from their colour fly, and that same eye whose bend doth awe the world did lose his lustre. I did hear him groan, aye, the tongue of his that bade the Romans mark him and write his speeches in their books. Alas, it cried, "Give me some drink, Titanus." As a sick girl, you gods, it doth amaze me. A man of such feeble temper would so get a start of the majestic world and bear the palm alone. So, what's fascinating in the story, this narrative that Cassius is unfolding before him, well, who's the I? Aeneas. Aeneas, who is none other than the great ancestor of the Roman people. Right.
He's invoking, like Virgil, tells the whole story in the Aeneid. Right. So he's comparing himself to the founder of Rome. Right, the heroic founder of Rome who traveled through hell, basically.
Yes, and his narrative, what does it shatter? Well, it shatters the myth of Caesar. He's shaking, right? He's quaking, and he needs help. All his coward lips, right? The color fleeing from him. Okay, so yes, okay. So all right, there's a shout. There's a flourish. Okay, here.
Another general shout. I do believe these applauses are for some new honors that are heaped on Caesar.
Yes. Why, men? He doth bestride the narrow world like a colossus, and we petty men walk under his huge legs and peep about to find ourselves dishonorable graves. Men at some time are masters of their fates. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves, that we are underlings. Now, okay, a few things here. The shout, the flourish is going in the background. In some ways, that's like reality knocking at the door, breaking in, or sounding in the background. But in any case, what's fascinating here is that the fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves, that we are underlings. Well, this is true in many ways. It's not the stars, it's not fate that's brought this about, or, some horoscope fortunes like this. No, we can direct our lives here below, and so there's truth in what he's saying. Which, in other words, it's like it's good bait. There has to be truth in the narrative which he's spinning, right? And look next how he spins this before Brutus's eyes, and here he's going to give the dialogue. Brutus and Caesar. What should be in that Caesar? Why should that name be sounded more than yours? Write them together, yours is as fair as a name. Sound them, if doth become the mouth as well. Weigh them, it is as heavy, conjure with them. Brutus will start his spirit as soon as Caesar. Now, surely it seems like Cassius is overreaching here a little bit. He's trying to elevate Brutus to see his name on the same par as Caesar's, if not above it. So to me, it seems like maybe he's playing his cards too quickly here.
Well, but not necessarily, though, because he has just undermined Caesar. He's saying your name has as much weight as this guy who can't swim.
Right.
As this guy who has coward lips and gets fevers and stuff like that. Like, you're as good as he is.
Right.
Which, if you think about it, is actually sort of an insult to Brutus.
Right. Yeah.
Like wrapped up in what's supposed to be either a compliment to Brutus or an insult to Caesar. Right. But it's rhetorically, well, perhaps effective.
In fact, okay. So, and we know Caesar can swim very well. When he was in Egypt, he was actually in a street battle, in urban warfare, and being shot at, and he had to jump through water and swim with armor on and all the rest. And he was a little time, but he made it, right? In daring. So, yeah, he could swim. Okay, nonetheless.
Well, which raises the question of how truthful is Cassius being in that anecdote.
Right. Yeah. Okay, now, in the names of all the gods at once, we see that here. Okay, upon what meant doth this our Caesar feed, that he is grown so great age, thou art ashamed. Rome, thou hast lost the breed of noble bloods. When went there by an age since the great flood, but it was famed with more than one man. When could, they say, till now that talk of Rome, that her wide walks encompass but one man? Now it is Rome indeed, and room enough, when there is in but one only man. Oh, you and I have heard our fathers say there was a Brutus once that would have brooked the eternal devil to keep his state in Rome as easily as a king.
And it is worth mentioning, and you can even see this in, I believe it's First Maccabees.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Right? The Romans were very proud of the fact that they didn't concentrate all of their greatness in one guy. Right? Yeah. That all the people all the people, quote unquote, elected the Senate, and and nobody held on to their power forever, and all this sort of thing. This was a real. I think other people noticed this about the Romans. So here Cassius is saying, well, this is terrible because now Rome used to have this greatness that we knew was shared by everybody, and now it's all concentrated in this one guy.
Right.
This one man. Look how narrow the narrow world has become. Right?
Yes.
That it fits between the legs of Julius Caesar, who I've just undermined for you.
Right, yeah.
Then Brutus says, that you do love me, I am nothing jealous. What you would work me to, I have some aim. How I have thought of this and of these times, I shall recount hereafter. For this present, I would not, so with love I might entreat you, be any further moved. What you have said I will consider, what you have to say I will with patience hear, and find a time both meet to hear and answer such high things. Till then, my noble friend, chew upon this. Brutus had rather be a villager than to repute himself a son of Rome under such hard conditions as this time is like to lay upon us.
I'm glad that my weak words have struck but this much show of fire from Brutus. So in other words, okay, so Brutus does give he goes out with a flourish. He's trying to once again, it's almost like in a wrestling match, but he's trying to reassert his noble virtue, right? But see what he's saying here? I'll give thought to this. I will recount it hereafter. Right? I'll consider more. So in other words, he's completely willing to entertain this, the seeds that are being. Well, he's going to allow them to germinate, essentially. Right? Now, if we're thinking of the spiritual combat here a little bit, what might be some tactics to deploy as defense against spiritual attack? Someone trying to implant some ideas. Any thoughts?
Well, what it makes me think of, first of all, obviously Cassius is using, as you've said, he's couching lies in truth. Right?
Yes.
He's couching the temptation to do something that Brutus would say was immoral, in things that, in the language of morality, in the language of honor, the language of selflessness, the language of patriotism.
Yes.
Now, this is where a lot of great spiritual masters have said, don't try to argue with the devil.
Right.
He's more clever than you.
Yeah.
He's been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
So, in sort of engaging him in the first place, I think maybe Brutus is making a mistake.
Right. Okay, yeah. Entertaining him. Yes.
By entertaining him right out of the gate, exactly. There's that line from, depending if it's Psalm 137, right? About by the rivers of Babylon.
Yes, that's right.
Ends with that startling passage that says, happy shall he be who takes the little ones of Babylon and dashes them against the rock.
Yes.
Now, it's a pretty horrifying passage if you take it literally, but a lot of church fathers, I think Jerome is one of them.
Yeah. Origen as
well. Say, well, the rock is Christ.
Yes.
Right, the rock that they're talking about here is Christ. Babylon is obviously spiritual Babylon, and refer back to our previous episodes for a lot more on that.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And so the little ones of Babylon, Babylon represents the kind of spiritual forces that are allied against God. The babies of Babylon are not the big sins, not murder necessarily, not like adultery. They're the little sins. They're
Yes.
the peccadillos.
Yes.
Right? The little sins that seem harmless.
Right.
It's like, well, and they're cute. They're the cute sins. You know, you kind of feel like, oh, I can let this one go. Right?
Yeah.
But if you do that, they say, guess what? You know what babies are prone to do?
What do they do?
They tend to grow up into bigger men.
Right. Yes.
Right? And that's what will happen with sin. You let little sins in, they grow up into bigger men. So as soon as you feel a temptation, even if it's for a little sin, even for a little white lie, dash it against the rock that is Christ, just mercilessly. Like, don't give it any traction. Don't let it woo you over, right? Am I allowed to say this word? C.S. Lewis paraphrases this as, bash the little bastard's brains out.
Okay.
In his reflections on the Psalms. So that would be my advice, is that right out of the gate, you should have, Brutus should have just done exactly that.
Yeah.
Thrown Cassius out the door, you know?
Yeah. Well, one thing I might say, and this tying in with Lewis here a little bit, if you recall, Edmund and Lucy both enter through the wardrobe, but there's some debate on, well, she's lying, right? Is she telling the truth or not? Right? So some of the siblings that are Susan and Peter, like, well, are taking the side of Edmund. How do you know what's true and what's not? Well, in some cases, it's helpful to have someone you can share your intimate thoughts with, a confessor, right, or a spiritual director, a mom or a dad, right? Someone who you can really genuinely,
hopefully a teacher, perhaps, who you trust,
Yeah. Well, okay. Now we're going to skip ahead here a little bit. Let's go to page 67.
I ought to warn you, this does not have lines. My edition.
Oh, does
so
it?
I'll have to
we're going to go to
rove
Act
around
2,
to find
Scene
where.
1. So
Act 2, Scene 1. Yeah. So this is where Brutus is reasoning with himself.
And in fact, well, here I want to go to Portia particularly. So here I'll be Portia. Sorry, this is line 250.
Yeah, which is not, they're not listed in mine. Portia is the wife of Brutus. Yes, that's right.
So do you see where Portia enters?
I see where she enters.
Okay,
yes.
So Brutus, my lord.
Portia, what mean you? Wherefore rise you now? It is not for your health thus to commit your weak condition to the raw, cold morning.
Yeah. Now, just for context, Brutus now has really given way to the conspiracy. He's on board, more or less. So his corruption now has...
Well, he says it must be by his death. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then he goes on and gives a whole bunch of reasons to try to convince himself that's true. But
yeah, and it's like swallowing poison, right? And so Portia can tell this there's something ill at ease with him. And I'm going to skip down here a little bit. Okay, let's just skip that next speech by Portia. Maybe we'll go to your next line there.
After her, I am not well in health, and that is all.
Okay, so what kind of answer is that? I mean, here he could confide to his dear wife, but he's it's just some indigestion or something.
Yeah, right.
So here, I think this is an inability to be honest, which is a sign of corruption, right? Sin, its tentacles wrapping themselves around his mind, and so turmoil as at work. But he's trying to paper over it as opposed to exposing it, like honestly, just telling her what's on his heart. Okay, so let's go to Portia's next line. Is Brutus sick? Wait.
Brutus is wise and...
Oh, sorry. Brutus is wise. Were not in health, he would embrace the means to come by it.
Why, so I do. Good Portia, go to bed.
Yeah, so he doesn't want to even give room to some sober second thought kind of thing, right? Okay, sorry. Oh, there we are. Is Brutus sick, and is it physical to walk unbraced and suck up the humors of the dark morning? What is Brutus sick, and will he steal out of his wholesome bed to dare the vile contagion of the night, and tempt the roomy and uppurged air to add unto his sickness? So in other words, this vile contagion of the night, is he going to address it or not? No, my Brutus, you have some sick offense within your mind, which by the right and virtue of my place I ought to know of. And now she kneels. Okay, so this is beautiful scene of this attempt, like Portia, his soulmate here, his spouse, his dearly betrothed, who's she knows more than just his physical illness. She detects an illness of the soul, and guesses correctly that there's a sick offense that's going on in your mind, and this is, I mean, pleading now. On knee. Okay. Upon my knees, I charm you by my once commended beauty, by all your vows of love, and that great vow which did incorporate and make us one, that you unfold to me yourself, your half. Why, you are heavy. And what men tonight have resort to you? For here have been some 6 or 7 who did hide their faces even from darkness.
Because the conspirators have shown up that night.
That's right.
And she's noticed this. And she's noticed that even though it's dark, they're still hiding their faces. So she knows what's going on.
Yes.
Just as a footnote to this,
sure.
In terms of Shakespeare coining so many phrases, notice here that the phrase you refer to your spouse as your better half.
Okay.
That's what she refers to herself as here. You unfold to me yourself, your half. Right. So Shakespeare comes to that, and I will just say, and this continues onwards in this scene, which we'll go on in. But this would not have been a given in Roman society at all. Right, for a man and a woman to have that, a husband and wife to have that kind of actual friendship, right? Okay, for her to not just be kind of
contractual,
like a piece of furniture, basically, in this house, with a certain function. This is very. I am one of these people who thinks Shakespeare was probably a recusant Catholic, but certainly this scene actually depicts what the sacrament of marriage should be very well. I mean, even she describes it as by that great vow which did incorporate and make us one. That incorporate, that doesn't mean that we started a business together, right? It means we are one body now.
A corpus.
Yeah, we are a corpus now.
In corpus, like incorporate, right?
Incorporate, one body, exactly, yes. So he says, kneel not, gentle Portia.
You're right. And so this is, he can't brook this, right?
Yes.
This prying,
it's not even prying.
I want to think the inbreaking of light, right? He prefers the men of the darkness, the shadows who've come and gone. He wants to consort with them. And this light, which is, breaking into this darkness, he's ill at ease.
There may even be a pun here on her name in some ways, right? Portia, like it's just a door or a window, right? Through which light breaks.
Okay, yes,
obviously, it's a historical figure, Portia, but Shakespeare may be playing with her name in that way, possibly. So.
Yes. Well, and it continues. I should not need if you were gentle Brutus. Within the bond of marriage, tell me. Now, isn't that something like, I know your nature, right? So if you were gentle Brutus, right? Okay. So in other words, touching his soul, his very essence of who he is, be authentic to who you are. Right. Okay. So this is how it unfolds. I don't know if there's another line you want to look at. I want to skip ahead to some other scenes now.
Other than I just she says if I'm just here to do what the typical Roman wife does, keep with you at meals and comfort your bed and talk to you sometimes. If it be no more, Portia is Brutus's harlot, not his wife. To which he replies, "You are my true and honorable wife, as dear to me as are the ruddy drops that visit my sad heart." I just want to note that I think this is just one of the best depictions of a marriage in all of Shakespeare, I would say. It's an inverse, in some ways, of the Macbeth marriage.
Yes, absolutely. And so these tears which are dropping now are so dear to his heart, but he's closed it off, right? He's not letting her in. He appreciates her candor. He appreciates this gesture, this grace, but he's refusing the grace, right? Okay, so here I think it might be helpful to look at, again, rhetoric and words and the corruption of the masses here, or the person, in another scene altogether. So this is Act 3, and this is Antony, and this is Brutus again in Antony. So let's go to Act 3. This is Scene 2, and this is where Brutus has to yes, here we have it. Okay, so this is Scene 2, where
Caesar has been killed at this point.
Caesar's been killed. And so what Brutus has to do now, you see him justifying it to himself. He's had to, he wouldn't explain to his wife, right? Yes. So and why not? Well, why do you think he wouldn't?
Well, he's lying in that scene to himself already. Like I said, at the beginning he has a soliloquy where he starts off by saying, Caesar must die. And then he goes on and gives himself a bunch of arguments why Caesar must die, which kind of shows that he's made up his mind already. He's trying to rationalize himself into it. But perhaps he knows that if he had to explain it out loud to someone other than himself, he'd realize how facetious or fatuous is the word, how fatuous it all is.
Right. Yes.
So he'd rather not have to explain it, because that would, again, in the withering daylight of reason, it wouldn't survive. Right?
Well, now he must do so. So this is line 14 or so, and this is his great speech here from the pulpit to the people. And here, I'll just read a few lines here. How would you say this? Okay. Romans, countrymen, and lovers, hear me for my cause, and be silent that you may hear. Believe me for my honor, and have respect to my honor, that you may believe. And he continues on here of his reasons. Line 21. If I, that friend, demanded why Brutus rose against Caesar, this is my answer. Not that I loved Caesar less, but I loved Rome more. Yes. So this is he's justifying it. And go down to line 26. And Caesar loved me. I weep for him. Okay, now, how is this the case? How could this possibly be? You could see he's conflicted. And what's notable here is it's not iambic pentameter, right? So he's speaking like someone who's fractured, someone whose thoughts are not organized. Usually it's someone of a lower class, less educated, who would speak like this. But here you can see that, in this contrast as to Anthony here, who's now going to, who is spared in the assaults, but he now gets a chance to talk. All right. So again, this is Brutus is how would you say this? Absolving himself, saying, "I love Caesar," right? And Rome more. And okay, so let's see what Anthony can do now. When he gets
Mark Antony. Now this is the famous line. Right? So
which one?
Well, his opening line. His opening.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears.
I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. Yes. The evil that men do lives after them. Now, do we want to go through the whole speech, or was there something you wanted to?
Well,
delightful though it is. Conscious of time. Is there anything you wanted to zone in on?
Okay, so what Anthony is going to do now is he's going to take charge. He's going to utilize his words, and he's going to do some of the exact same, very similar moves to Cassius in presenting a narrative, in implanting ideas in the minds of the crowd, of those who are there. There he goes. But he has to be very reticent in what he says, at first at least, because he can't let out of the bag that he's up against Brutus and the conspirators. Right. So look what he says. It'll go down line 95. But Brutus is an honorable man, right? And he repeats this again and again. Brutus, yet Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. Okay, so there he goes, and he mentions again, yet Brutus is ambitious and an honorable man. Okay, so this is him creating that distance, right? That distance between, at least giving some space for him to go on. All right, let's see, what else can we say here? Yes, but yesterday, okay, let's go on line 130. Are you there? But yesterday the word of Caesar might?
Like I said, this very unhelpfully is not labeled, so you can just read aloud, and I'll
okay. But yesterday, this is Anthony here. Yesterday the word of Caesar might have stood against the world. Now he lies there, and none so poor as to do him reverence. O masters, if I were disposed to stir your hearts and minds to mutiny and rage, I should do Brutus wrong and Cassius wrong, who you all know are honorable men. So that's mentioned again. I will not do them wrong. Now, Anthony really does want to do them wrong. And that's his whole point. But he says, I'd rather choose to wrong the dead, to wrong myself than you, that I wrong such honorable men. Okay, so then, here, there's a parchment with the seal of Caesar. I found it in a closet. And so here he tells him it's his will. So his last will and testament. And basically, what's fascinating here is this reverse psychology he plays with the crowd. He's like, I'm not going to read it now. But it has to do with his legacy, his rich legacy that he's going to bequeath to. All right, now, so, and then the crowd is like, oh, read it. And he's like, no, Have patience, friends. I must not read it. So he's ensnaring the audience.
Yes.
He's getting them in. And basically what ends up happening is this finely orchestrated manipulation of the crowds here, where Anthony, again, he's got them hooked on what's this riches that Caesar's going to leave to us, or perhaps to us. Okay, so then he descends. He goes down, this is line 175. And he gets them to stand around. Let's make a ring around the corpse of Caesar, right? And then I'll show you the will, right? Him that made the will. Okay, so he asked permission, of course, that to come down, and they grant it. Okay, and then he says, and then he says, if you have tears, prepare to shed them now. So again, this is like an Inception. He's planting the idea in them, and then instructing them to take course with them, right? And he tells them to. So he's instructing them to start crying, and he gives them this story about, well, what happens here. Brutus stabbing him. That's line 188. The blood, how it flowed out of him, and so here it is. For Brutus, as you know, was Caesar's angel. Judge, O you gods, how dearly Caesar loved him. Right? So how is it that this angel that loved him, because Brutus even admitted earlier that he loved Caesar, couldn't kill him, right? And in gratitude, more strong than traitor's arms, quite vanished him. Right. So this is the blood, even at the base of Pompey's statue, right? Which while the world around blood, great Caesar fell, right? And so this is it. So this is bloody treason now, has flourished over us. Okay, so now, and then he says, now he's instructing them. Oh, now you weep. So now he's implanted. Now he's telling them, giving them imperative, like, now you need to weep. Right?
Yes.
What's going on? Okay, so and here you just imagine you're one of the crowd members, right? One of the plebs here. You're standing around the body of Caesar. You can see the wound marks, the blood that's there. Now your tears are there. You could see Caesar through the end has left us his legacy. He wanted our best. Certainly it seems like that. What's the reaction going to be? Right.
Oh, they're a lot of people outbursts is what we see here, right? Oh, noble Caesar, woeful day, traitors, villains, almost bloody sight. All right. Again, it's sort of like Brutus's speech. It's an inchoate mass of emotion in some ways, of indignation and protest.
Yeah. And what's fascinating here is, amidst the protest, Anthony's going to say the opposite of what he wants, knowing that the crowd will force his hand to. So again, he's planted these ideas, and now he wants to elicit them out of them, but wants the audience to have appropriated them fully. Right?
Yeah, to make them feel like they're the ones who came up with it themselves. They're the ones in charge. Yes.
So if this is line 223 or 4 about, good friends, sweet friends, let me not stir you up. Well, really?
Right.
Okay, are you really? Okay, to such a sudden flood of mutiny. Well, there now he's suggesting what to do.
Yes.
Mutiny.
Yeah, right. By saying not to do it, he's given them the idea to do it. Yes.
Yes, and he goes back to getting them being honorable. They are wise and honorable, and will not doubt the reasons answer you. Yeah, right. Okay. I come not, friends, to steal away your hearts. I'm no orator as Brutus is. Well, that is...
that's clearly fictional.
Yes. So, yes, and I'm a plain, blunt man. Well, hardly, right? Hardly. For neither wit nor words nor worth. Well, right. Okay. So here, and he goes, show your sweet Caesar's wounds, poor dumb mouths, and bid them speak for me, but were I Brutus and Brutus Anthony, were therein Anthony would ruffle up your spirits and put a tongue in every wound of Caesar that would move the stones of Rome to rise and mutiny. So he won't even say it. He's like, if I were Brutus, I might say this.
Yes.
But I'm just Anthony. But if I were, I would say rise to mutiny. And so this is it. We'll mutiny. All right, and burn the house of Brutus, and so it's unleashed. Okay, I have only one last comment here to make. I don't know if you have anything else to say on this scene.
On the scene, no.
Okay, well, it's as it unfolds. You have to really appreciate. I mean, they're exiting with Caesar's body. They're now ready to go in this mob, and it is going to be a brutal mob, which unfurls havoc And, well, this is exactly Anthony's last lines. Now let it work. Mischief, thou art afoot. Right? Take thou what course thou wilt. So this is it. This is the inception. It's unleashed, his plan. So here, I guess, to tie things together then in terms of realism and virtue, we see this reworking of virtue in these scenes, where these ideas are implanted within others who then appropriate these plans and run with them to horrific results. Right? So it's the idea is given, that patient believes it's their own, it's their it's germane to themselves, or it's germane within themselves, and now they appropriate it, allow it to flourish, and then it's validated by others around them, so that this is my idea, and let's run with it, unleashing great havoc. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting how that Inception is used here, both for the murder of Caesar, and then also for the exciting of the crowd who are angry at Caesar's murder.
Right. Yes.
But then the crowd itself gets murderous, right? They're killing innocent people. They're killing a poet who had nothing to do with anything. Yeah. So I think that, Shakespeare's very alert to all of the different ways that rhetoric can be used sinfully.
Yes.
Now, what my final comment on this would be, in response to your question before about how to ward it off, it's not just that we need to not listen to the wrong voices. It's also that we need to listen to the right voices, which are pretty plain.
Yeah.
And in this play, again, if you want to put a Catholic read on it, you could say what that means is listen to God, right? Yeah. So we have the soothsayer, and he doesn't give some cryptic inception-y thing. He just says, hey, Caesar, look out. Tomorrow's dangerous for you.
Yes. Yeah.
And Caesar blows him off. Then his wife has a dream about a statue weeping blood of himself, right? People going up and, like, bathing themselves in it. Yeah. And at first Caesar is like, okay, fair enough. Well, he is skeptical, but he's like, okay, for your sake, dear, I'll stay home today. I won't go out. Yeah. But then one of the conspirators comes and says, oh, no, you're misunderstanding that. Well, the blood represents your life. And it's like life is going to stream forth from you, and everyone's going to bathe in your life, and you're going to bless everybody in Rome. So you're just reading the dream wrong. Now, that's really twisting. The dream is pretty straightforward. Yeah. Caesar, here's a statue of you. Yeah. And the first scene is people put crowning statues of Caesar, so they represent him. It's covered with blood. Yeah. You will be covered in blood tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah.
So again, like the soothsayer, it speaks for itself, but, ye shall not surely die. Right? Yes, just like the devil says to Eve, right? It's, these like the serpent winding. There's serpent winding logical tricks to try to, no, it doesn't really mean this. God didn't really say this. And if, again, this is pre-Christian, pretty close to Christ, but pre-Christian story. But if Caesar had listened to the gods, who were straightforward enough with him, and then he says at one point, well, the gods are cowards. Right? Yes. Danger should be scared of me. Yeah. I'm Caesar, right? Yeah. If he just listened to that wouldn't have happened, right? It's the rhetorical tricks of the devil, right? Yeah. Sometimes truth is pretty plain, right? Like the devil is the serpent, but when God speaks, he speaks through an ass. Right? Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward donkey. So I think that would be my closing remark on this: is not only don't listen to clever rhetoric. Like Paul says, I didn't come to speak, with wise, clever words to impress you, but I proclaim nothing but the cross of Christ, right? Also, listen to God, right? Listen to the right voices, and not to clever reasonings, but to the Word of God as best you can. I think that might be Shakespeare's message for us for today.
Right. So. Yeah. Okay. Would you like to close in prayer?
Well, all right. Fair enough. Then. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Lord, thank you for this discussion. We pray that it blesses people and helps them be more open to you and to listen to you. And we pray, Lord, that as we study and as we learn, it not only edifies us, but also always sanctifies us. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Saint Isidore, pray for us. Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.